Well, hello. I wanted to welcome you to this two-part series, Navigating Public Improvement Projects During COVID-19. I'm Chris Petrie, the Director of Rochester Operations for WSB, and joining me as a moderator is Bart Fisher, a Senior Public Administrator for WSB. As you all know, we've all been affected in unprecedented and profound ways by the COVID-19 virus. We at WSB want to be a resource for you during these challenging times. That's why we've put together this two-part series on navigating public improvement projects during COVID-19. Today, we're going to start with part one, which is public engagement and municipal requirements. On behalf of the entire WSB team, we appreciate you taking the time to take part in this webinar series. As mentioned, we're happy to be a resource for all of you. However, we'd also like to remind you that the information and resources provided and presented today are predicated on the approval and acceptance of each of your organization's attorneys. With that, I'll turn it over to our other moderator, Bart Fisher, to introduce our first presenter.
Well, thank you, Chris. And again, welcome to all of you. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy days to join us on this webinar. Our first speaker today is our colleague, Dan Pfeiffer, who is the Director of Public Engagement for us at WSB. And Dan, during public engagement can be difficult even when there isn't a crisis going on, such as COVID-19. I know I've had multiple conversations with many public sector colleagues, and they are figuring out how to do online council meetings, commission meetings, and board meetings. However, public engagement as it relates to projects presents its own set of challenges. Could you tell us a little bit more about some of the tools that you are aware of to get that message out?
Good afternoon. As Bart had mentioned, I'm Dan Pfeiffer. I'm the Director of Public Engagement at WSB. The recent social distancing and stay-at-home orders has furthered the digital transformation in the engagement space. For a number of years, we've used digital and virtual engagement to supplement our in-person activities. Now, many projects are asking, how should we move forward when we can't meet in person, when we can't lead with that in-person engagement? Today, I'll be talking about continuing the public process. When people work together, public engagement is critical to building consensus and problem solving. Public engagement creates the opportunity to learn from the community's lived experiences. Through intentional engagement, we can understand the wants, needs, and aspirations of a community and develop projects that reflect the community. By working together, we can build support for the project and identify and address concerns with the project. When people work together, almost anything is possible. Successful engagement begins with planning. This starts with defining the engagement goal. What decisions have been made? What decisions are on the table? What role can the public play? Or what influence can the public have on the decision maker? Setting and managing expectations is important. If you tell the public everything is on the table, when it isn't, you risk losing trust. Next, you need to identify the audience. Who are they? Where are they located? How do they currently consume information? Do they have the space and capacity to engage on a project right now? After you've defined your engagement goal and identified your audience, you can craft your message. Your message should be easy to understand and consume. Be clear what actions you want the audience to take. Do you want the public to share their opinion? Then be clear in your invitation. Finally, you can identify the tools, techniques, and channels you will use to deliver your message and the call to action to your audience to achieve your goal.
Dan, a question here. How do you determine the right tactic for an audience?
Determining the right tactic begins with research. You have to look into how are they currently consuming information? What platforms do they currently use? If you think about Facebook, Facebook's a good example. Facebook, the generation that is currently using Facebook was the generation that was in college 10 to 15 years ago. As the generation that grew up with it continued with it, while the new generation has moved into Instagram and other social media tools. Think about how you currently communicate with your residents and your businesses. Think about your newsletters, your either emails, e-news blasts, your website. Think about how you're tracking your existing communication tools. Like, do you include a call to action, and are you tracking that? What is the open rate? What's the click-through rate? And then it comes down to a lot of educated testing and trial. You want to use multiple tools, expand on it. That's learn from what you did before. So the Pew Research has been tracking digital connectivity for years. They know how many people have smartphones. I mean, in February 2019, 96% of US adults owned a cell phone. 81% of those owned a smartphone. 74% owned a desktop or laptop computer. We know that internet usage, 90% of US adults have used the internet. 73% are home broadband users. We know who is using the internet, who has access to broadband, and we can look at the data to see who doesn't have access and who isn't connected. And those are what we use to feed into how we make decisions in engagement.
So, Dan, how do you navigate connectivity issues?
So connectivity issues, we have to understand the audience that we're trying to reach. We have to understand what their level of broadband is. Some areas, you can have a 100 megabyte presentation, slideshow, or a video, and it's not an issue. There's high bandwidth. Other areas, they might be using slower, more restricted bandwidths, and so we need to use tools that reflect that. We need to shrink the images down. We need to make sure that the videos are short, that they're easy to understand. We also need to be aware that we might not be able to use all the digital tools that we want to use. We might have to use some of the older techniques that we might not be using as much anymore. Those telephone town halls, those hotlines, that phone-in number where someone can call and just talk to someone and ask them questions about it. Those are all options that we need to use to connect to the public. So as we've moved through in-person engagement, we focus a lot on access and participation. When we plan in-person events, we consider access to the location. Is it in the target community? Is it on transit? Is it a community gathering space? Is it welcoming to all community members? Is it ADA accessible? We also consider what the time of the meeting is. We know, typical meetings are held in the evenings. We know that draws a typical crowd. We know that. We also know that we check to see what other events are scheduled to occur. We don't schedule multiple public meetings on the same night so that people have to compete for which project they really want to go to. And so those same items that we're doing for in-person events, we need to do in the digital space. We need to consider the access to the tool. We need to consider, does it meet web accessibility standards? Can someone with a screen reader use it? Are the videos closed captioned so that someone who's hearing impaired can participate? Designing the experience for the user improves the experience for all users. So think about the curb ramps that you walk across in your community. Those are designed to serve people who are rolling, people who have lower mobility movement. But they improve everyone's life. They make it easier for if you're on a bike and you're crossing a street. The tactile warning strips, the little rumble strips that you see in the corners of intersections that you walk across, those are so someone who's visually impaired can be triggered to realize that they're getting to a roadway crossing. Those improve everyone, make everyone's life easier and make everyone's life more accessible. And so we need to think about that when we think about the digital experience. And finally, we need to think about the barriers. What is the access to internet, the language, the competing priorities? Can the targeted community participate? Does the community have the necessary technology? Is it the right time? Is there a lot of other things going on in the community that forces them that maybe they can't participate at this point? So as we've identified that, we have the audience, we have our goal, we have our messages, and the community can participate, the community is able to participate. Now we can move into what tools and techniques to make engagement happen. For years, we've used these digital tools and techniques to support the in-person engagement, and now it's time to use them to lead during this time of uncertainty. So we have multiple different options. So digital and virtual engagement methods, from online surveys, virtual webinars, informational websites, geo-targeted social media campaigns, Facebook Live, internet streaming. Most webinar functions, virtual meeting functions, you can stream them out to other services. You have content mapping, so comment mapping, so think about the wiki maps, social pinpoint. There's a whole bunch of tools to use, the ArcGIS type tools. You could have digital Q&A sessions, polling. You could have a digital office hour. If you normally have office hours for your city engineer for a project where from, coffee with the engineer, coffee with the contractor, those type of events, do it in a digital environment. Have it so that a certain time at a certain day, someone can call in using a phone, using the internet. There's numerous tools that you can use to do that, to continue to engage that way. And then when barriers exist, we need to think about what we do to overcome those barriers. And some of it is going back to some tried and true techniques. Having that voicemail box where someone can call in, we can give them a call back and answer their question. Mass mailings, postcards, letters, still an effective way to send out information. Telephone town halls, you'll see a lot of elected officials have been using those recently. Community network, these are the community network is always a great source to push information out. This can be the religious community in your city. It could be a neighborhood group. They know of their neighbors and they speak to their neighbors. Even in this time, they talk to each other, they send messages to each other. And so pushing out the information across those platforms. Publicizing project information in the local paper. You can mail out paper surveys. There's automated phone systems, so you can robocall essentially. And then videos on local access. So that if someone doesn't have cable access, they can, or doesn't have internet access, they can access the project video on local television. Next, I'm going to talk about some tools to collaborate with the public or with other team members in a remote environment. On the screen is just a Microsoft Whiteboard. It's a tool that we can use across our video conferencing platforms that allow us to, in real time, mark up and have multiple people writing on a whiteboard. For engagement in a digital space, it really comes down to whether or not the tool is iterative or interactive. So iterative would be you post some information, you have a survey. The community goes to that survey, they take that survey, you get the results, then you post a response. You post either like a frequently asked questions document, you post another video that talks about here's what you heard, here's how you're going to use that information. It's important to close the feedback loop with the public, that you want to tell the public how you're going to use their information and why they should participate, and then tell them how it has influenced the project outcome, or if it hasn't, why hasn't it? So that you don't leave people with the sense that they commented but nothing happened. Some of the tools that you can use in the iterative space are the surveys, forums, ideation forums, so that kind of pop up. Everyone, community members put a comment on a digital board. Other people can like it, they can comment on it. You can get some interaction that way. Wiki mapping, polling, you can use that either web polling or in a virtual space. Recorded webinars and presentations are great. Right now, if you think about your in-person public meetings, you would typically start those with a 10-minute presentation welcoming everyone. You could do that in a digital environment. You can record yourself talking to your PowerPoint presentation, post that online, post it on YouTube or any number of services will even close caption it for you. So running an AI program to close caption it, or you can outsource that and it's relatively inexpensive. Having a hotline, phone or email so that someone can call, leave a message, you call them back, you tell it, answer their questions, go through that process. Or you could do the interactive, hold a virtual office hour, do a virtual meeting, Zoom as a platform, Skype, GoToMeeting. In the past few weeks, I'm sure everyone has experienced some form of virtual meetings, everywhere from the 30-minute quick discussions about something to multi-hour focus groups that have breakout rooms, polling embedded into it, moderators, facilitators, all those kind of things. You can also build in two-way text messaging as a way to talk to continue your engagement. As we move into virtual meetings, you want to think about what is the right tool for the right size of group. So smaller groups, you can do that phone call, group phone call or small group meeting. It doesn't take a lot of effort. It's a little bit of planning ahead, send out some advanced materials, schedule ahead of time so that it's not just a pop-up meeting. And it's fairly easy to moderate. As you start adding people, you want to start thinking about having someone as a moderator that is different than the presenter. And then as you get into that 20+ range, you really want to think about having someone that is helping control kind of the back end side of all the technology. So the Q&A functions, all those chat functions, so that they know they can jump in, get the presenter's attention, keep those things going. As a suggestion, it's better to schedule it into shorter segments or create breaks so that people can take a chance to decompress from being on a video conference calls. As we are adjusting to our new realities, it's important to understand that we are all learning, that we're all learning this together, and that there will be times when we stumble and there will be times when we have great successes. And the importance is setting those expectations at the beginning of meetings, that you're going to try to implement a meeting in a virtual space. Here's what the expectations are, setting some ground rules, and then seeing where it goes. Personally, I've helped lead facilitated meetings with 20 staff members through a focus group, and a 50-person facilitated meeting with a professional facilitator, some moderators, breakout sessions that lasted almost 4 hours with some break time in between. Both were successful. Both involved evolving throughout the process. One of them, we started off, we wanted everyone to raise their hand electronically before they spoke. Then we realized that we didn't really need to do that because people were conscious of interrupting each other and making sure that they found gaps to speak. So thank you for participating. Thank you for listening to this presentation.
Thank you, Dan. If you don't mind, I'd like to follow up with a couple of questions with you really quick here. First of all, do you help develop any of the messaging?
Yes. So WSB has a team of content and graphic artists that can really help develop project messages. A few kind of tips: keep it simple, easy to understand. Ask someone who is not working on the project and is not a technical staff member to look at the message and see if they understand it. If you have to explain the message to, to your partner or your spouse or your kids, then you might want to think about, it might not be as simple as you thought it would be. Often in our fields, we get ingrained in the projects and ingrained in the jargon and ingrained into everything so that it makes complete sense to us. But when a member of the public reads it, it is confusing and they have a lot of questions. So one thing to think about is a very short key message, and then have 3 supporting statements, why it's important to tell people.
Thank you, Dan. And then finally, is there a top takeaway that you'd like to leave people with?
I think the top takeaway is planning. Planning is important. It will lead to setting and managing the expectations. And just acknowledge that the virtual focus group you want to hold may be clunky. It may not go off perfectly, but because you've planned and you've built in contingencies, you can continue through the process. That the public recognizes this is a challenging time. And just be honest that we're all learning this together. We're all adjusting to the new reality. One thing I'd like to share, a recent survey that I saw had the percentage of population reported to watching more TV right now was dramatically higher. And if you look at digital engagement throughout many municipalities, many counties, many state projects, the engagement in the digital space has increased. So, thank you.
Well, thank you, Dan, and appreciate your insights on public engagement. And now I'll turn it back over to Chris to introduce our next speaker.
Terrific. Thank you, Dan and Bart. I appreciate that. And the next person we have up is Monica Heil, our Senior Director of Municipal Services here at WSB. Welcome, Monica.
Thank you, Chris.
You bet. And I wanted to start, Monica, you're going to talk, we've asked you to talk a little bit about kind of municipal requirements. Dan covered the public engagement piece as we talk about these public improvement projects, and we're going to talk a little bit about bidding and also project delivery. So maybe we'll start talking about the bidding side of things and what we're seeing out there and how our clients, our partners are going about modifying their public bid openings, dealing with electronic bidding, some of those sorts of things. So maybe one of the first things I have for you, and I think I know the answer, but are projects still being bid during COVID-19 and over the past number of weeks?
Yes, projects are still being bid. The timing of the COVID-19 breakout and the stay-at-home order that was issued for the state of Minnesota was interesting because it was also the peak of what we would typically consider our municipal bidding season. And so many municipalities had already advertised bid opening dates, many of them in person, and there were a number of adjustments that were made by our community partners in order to still facilitate those bids. We'd also already been working with many communities to bid projects electronically for the past couple of bidding seasons, where using platforms available to all of us, we're able to receive bids from contractors electronically, not only the bid unit prices, but also the documentation that must be submitted along with a bid, the bid bond, the certifications, responsible contractor verifications, all of that can be submitted electronically. And in addition to allowing bidders to participate virtually, a lot of electronic bidding is also, in a lot of ways, more efficient for both city staff and a consultant partner working with the city. Many of the materials that are submitted are already in an electronic format, making bid verifications much more efficient and accurate, and to understand exactly what type of numbers contractors are putting into their bid prices. But for those communities that have not used electronic bidding, I would encourage you to start thinking about it, not just as it relates to COVID-19 and how that's affected our day-to-day business today, but also in the future, and ways that we can be more efficient in receiving our bids moving forward, even when we are able to meet together again in person. We had a number of communities that, as I mentioned, had advertised public bid openings in person at City Hall that issued addendums that indicated that there was a change in the bidding, some of them moving to electronic and posting the bids once they had been received electronically online. There were other communities that, in addition to bidding electronically, they also offered up an opportunity to watch this electronic bid opening virtually through some type of conference call, where the screen that is typically displayed at City Hall for an electronic bid opening, where all of the bids are simultaneously revealed to anyone that may congregate at City Hall for this opening. We shared this information virtually through a series of conference calls. And so the industry responded to the external pressures that we had to physically separate and not deliver things in person. It did take a little bit of time to figure out how to do that. And of course, consulting with your own city attorney is always a best practice, but understanding that how we can continue to serve our communities and deliver these projects is something everyone responded to this year. Moving forward, I think, again, in addition to the efficiencies, there are other benefits, not only for the public sector and the consultants serving them, but also for contractors that are sometimes submitting multiple bids on any given day and able to understand what bids are coming in different communities and how they might need to adjust their bids to get different work in different communities. And so thinking about moving forward, how this is advantageous to us as an industry, and then what you might do to prepare for that in future years, including adoption of policy language for your community that would allow for electronic bids to be received for any project in any given year, COVID-19 or not.
Great. Well, thank you, Monica. That was definitely helpful, I know, to a lot of our friends out in the industry and struggling with what to do during these times. And I know you talked a lot about, you know, a lot of our clients and a lot of projects we had that maybe started right away. The bids were actually out. We've since had to modify our bid opening practices and those sorts of things. So maybe just as a real brief follow-up, now we also have clients, and we know there's municipalities out there that have had to move forward with actually bidding projects while this is going on, maybe not only releasing the bids and putting them out, those advertisements, but also opening. Are you able now, with maybe having some of the experience of kind of midstream getting caught in this, to advising some of our clients and others on how to proceed? And are you handling it in a similar way as you just described?
Very good question. We are recommending at least trying electronic bidding at this particular time, and seeing that while it is different from how we've done business in the past, you still get to the same end place. getting all of the necessary documentation, verifying the bids, all of that takes place and is submitted through a platform that ensures both the security and the accuracy of the information that is permitted. And so those documents that are submitted electronically can all be filed and saved away for future audits, and have all the necessary audit materials as well. And so we do encourage communities to think about electronic bidding moving forward. What we are seeing now for those projects that are still out to bid, everything's being done electronically. The advertisements, the submission of the bids, and even some of the contract document exchange that we see is all being done electronically to both expedite the process, but then also maintain everyone's safety during the process.
Excellent. Thanks, Monica. So now maybe moving on from bidding. So communities have now, we've talked about the process that we've been going through with folks, and that most likely almost every municipality has experienced that has some type of public improvement project that they're trying to accomplish and build this year. So now we move on, we've got the bids opened, we've figured out a solution for that. We move on to awarding the contracts and actually move into project delivery. So maybe let's start just talking about, you know, how are things being conducted once they go to construction? I know we have a number of clients, we have a number of projects we're managing that are now have moved through in the last number of weeks, have moved on from kind of how do we get there, how do we open bids, how do we award a contract. Now we've moved into construction. Thankfully the weather's turned and we're getting there. So tell us about a little bit about what do we do now that we go on to construction? Everything from how are pre-construction meetings being handled, and those sorts of things.
Another good question. Every pre-construction meeting I've participated in this year has been via video conference. And if nothing else, I think this has taught us how we can all use technology to participate in events that we would have otherwise met in person to do online and at safe distances. And so municipalities, consultant partners, contractors, everyone's embracing the technology to the best of their abilities in order to be able to continue on with the business. And so pre-construction meetings that I've been a part of have all been held virtually. When construction gets started, each discussion with the contractor and the team starts with safety. Safety not only for the contractor, the consultant, the city employees, but also for residents living within the project areas. And so safety is of the utmost importance. When there are meetings, weekly meetings, they are typically being conducted virtually, or if they are being conducted in the field, they're being conducted using safe and recommended social distancing practices. Social distancing is being employed not only by, again, the municipality and the consulting partners, but also the contractors to ensure everyone's safety. Questions have come up from the public as to whether or not this work should be taking place, could be taking place, and what are we doing to be safe about it. And social distancing is employed wherever practical, but if there are situations where safe social distancing cannot be practiced, WSB is recommending the use of face masks for our employees. We are also having questions directed to us about whether or not we're taking away face masks from medical professionals, and conversations to have with your staff, should they be asked about this by residents, would be to prepare your staff to answer that the types of face masks that most construction related workers are wearing, or consultants or municipalities are wearing, are not medical face masks or surgical face masks. They're not N95 respirators unless they're being used by a contractor as a PPE for a specific construction activity. And so we are educating our staff about what types of questions were being asked in different communities by residents wanting to know, number one, are we taking this seriously and are we doing what we can to be safe? But number two, wanting to make sure that we're not taking away from any of the resources that would otherwise be directed to medical professionals. And so it's very important to us that we make sure that we communicate that while we're doing what we need to do to be safe, we're in no way taking away resources from those that are otherwise fighting this. So making sure that people are educated. about what it is we're doing out there. Certainly some of the communication with residents has changed, how we communicate with them. More of it's being done over the phone whenever possible, talking to people over the phone rather than on their front stoop or in their front yard if we can't practice safe social distancing. And so more than anything, I would say that this is an exercise in safety and planning to make sure that we are taking the necessary steps in order to protect not only the construction team, but also the public with any construction area.
Well, thanks, Monica. And I know WSB is also wanting to be a resource for our clients, partners, or anyone for that matter. So we also do have that's available, and I'll put up in just a moment here a slide that has all of our contact information. And I know we have, as it relates to project delivery, some frequently asked questions that we can help people through and walk some of our clients through moving forward on their projects if they would need any help.
Absolutely.
So with that, that does conclude our first part of this two-part series. We want to thank all of you for joining us, sincerely thanking you for joining us and participating in this webinar. We value your continued commitment and partnership with WSB, and I want to thank our presenters today, Dan Pfeiffer and Monica Heil. Both of you, thank you for your time and doing this presentation today. As you can see, our contact information for all four of us is up on the screen in front of you. I know I can say without hesitation, please feel free to contact any one of us if you have any questions on what we presented today, or you need any assistance with any projects going on in your communities. We're more than happy to help. And finally, from all of us, stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see you all soon.